The mahogany walls of Wright and Patterson law offices had witnessed countless will readings, but none quite like this. I sat quietly in the corner, watching my siblings barely contain their excitement as Mr. Patterson adjusted his reading glasses. Grandpa Maxwell had been different from the rest of my family. While they chased status and wealth in Manhattan's upper circles, he spent his days in his study, surrounded by old books and curious artifacts. "Elizabeth," he'd say, "sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight." I was the only one who visited him regularly during those final years. My sister Sophia was too busy with her socialite lifestyle, and my brother James claimed his investment banking career left no time for nostalgic afternoons with a senile old man. But I knew better. Grandpa's mind had been sharp until the end. "Let's begin," Mr. Patterson's voice cut through my thoughts. "The last will and testament of Maxwell Arlington Spencer III. Sophia straightened her Chanel suit, while James loosened his Hermes tie. Our parents sat rigidly in their chairs, maintaining their practiced dignity. "To my daughter Margaret and her husband Thomas," Mr. Patterson read, "I leave my summer house in the Hamptons, valued at $5 million. My mother's smile was pristine, though I noticed she'd already known this was coming. "To my grandson James I leave my investment portfolio, valued at $12 million. James's smirk grew wider. He'd been eyeing that portfolio for years. "To my granddaughter Sophia, I leave my collection of fine arts and antiques, valued at $8 million, along with $3 million in cash." Sophia practically purred with satisfaction. Then Mr. Patterson paused, adjusting his glasses again. "And to my granddaughter Elizabeth." The room seemed to hold its breath. I'd spent the most time with Grandpa after all. "3. I leave my old brass key currently stored in my study desk." The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds before Sophia's laughter shattered it. "A key." She couldn't contain herself. "Poor Elizabeth gets a key while we get millions." James joined in, shaking his head with mock sympathy. "Well, she always was Grandpa's little bookworm. Probably thinks it's romantic or something." Our mother didn't laugh, but her tight smile said everything. "Darling, perhaps you should have spent less time indulging your grandfather's eccentricities and more time building a proper career." I sat there, feeling the weight of their amusement, their pity, their satisfaction at seeing the family disappointment get what they thought she deserved. But something nagged at me, the way Grandpa had smiled during our last conversation, the cryptic words he'd left me with. "The key to understanding isn't always what it seems, Elizabeth. Remember that." Mr. Patterson cleared his throat. "There is one condition to all bequests. No assets can be liquidated or transferred for 30 days following this reading." "Hardly matters," James scoffed. "We all know what we're doing with our inheritances anyway." As the others gathered their things discussing celebration plans at the plaza, I approached Mr. Patterson's desk. "The key." He handed me a small wooden box. Inside lay an ordinary-looking brass key, aged and worn. Something about its design seemed familiar. "Your grandfather left this note with it," Mr. Patterson added, passing me a sealed envelope. I waited until I was alone in the hallway to read it. "My dearest Elizabeth, they see what they want to see. But you, my brilliant girl, always saw what was truly there. The key isn't just a key. You'll know where it belongs. All my love, Grandpa." That evening, while my siblings celebrated their millions at the plaza, I returned to Grandpa's mansion. The housekeeper, Mrs. Chin, let me in with a knowing smile. She'd been there for 40 years and knew every corner of the house. "Your grandfather spent a lot of time in his study these past few months," she said softly. "Especially at night." The study was exactly as I remembered: walls of books, the old globe in the corner, his beloved desk where we'd spent countless hours as he taught me about history, art, and the true value of things. But tonight something felt different. I ran my fingers along the spines of his favorite books, remembering how he'd quiz me about their contents. "Knowledge isn't just in the words," he'd say, "but in understanding what's between them." The brass key felt warm in my pocket. Looking around the study with fresh eyes, I began to notice things I'd overlooked before. The way certain books sat at odd angles. The peculiar pattern of wear on the hardwood floor. The subtle markings on the wooden panels behind his desk. That's when it hit me. The key's unusual design, I'd seen it before. Not as a key but as a pattern, repeated in the wooden molding above Grandpa's favorite reading chair. My heart pounding, I pulled the chair aside and examined the panel behind it. There, nearly invisible unless you knew what to look for, was a keyhole. My hands trembled as I inserted the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. With a deep breath, I turned it, hearing a series of clicks within the wall. The wooden panel swung open silently, revealing a dark passage. "He always said this house had secrets," Mrs. Chin whispered from the doorway, making me jump. She held out a flashlight. "Your grandfather asked me to give you this when the time came." Of course she knew. Mrs. Chin had been Grandpa's confidant longer than I'd been alive. The passage led down a narrow staircase. The beam of the flashlight revealed walls lined with steel, not the mansion's usual wood paneling. At the bottom, I found myself facing a vault door, not some antique for show but a modern, serious security installation. Next to it was a keypad. Above it, engraved in the steel, were the words, "The key to understanding isn't always what it seems." Grandpa's last words to me. I examined the brass key in my hand more carefully, turning it over under the flashlight's beam. There, etched into the metal so finely I'd missed it before, was a series of numbers. The keypad beeped as I entered them, and the vault door opened with a soft hiss. What I found inside took my breath away. The room was massive, easily larger than the study above. Climate-controlled cases lined the walls, filled with artifacts that would make museum curators weep. Ancient manuscripts, rare gems, archaeological treasures, pieces that had never appeared in the official family collection Sophia had inherited. But it was the center of the room that made my knees weak. There, on a simple pedestal, sat a leather-bound ledger and another envelope with my name. "My dearest Elizabeth," the letter began, "if you're reading this, you've proven once again that you understand the difference between looking and seeing. While your siblings counted their millions, you counted the things that truly mattered: knowledge, curiosity, and the wisdom to know that value isn't always measured in dollars." My hands shook as I opened the ledger. Inside were detailed records of Grandpa's true holdings, accounts, investments, and properties that dwarfed what he'd left the others. But more importantly, there were records of his secret collection, artifacts gathered over decades, each with its own extraordinary history and value. "The collection your sister inherited?" the letter continued. "Carefully curated decoys. Beautiful, yes, but merely the visible tip of a much larger iceberg. The real treasures are here, along with everything you need to prove their provenance and authenticity." I sank into a nearby chair, overwhelmed by the implications. This vault contained billions in artifacts alone, not counting the financial assets detailed in the ledger. "Your brother thinks he understands wealth because he moves numbers on a screen. Sophia believes she knows art because she can quote auction prices. But you, my dear, understand that true value lies in the story, the history, the knowledge behind each piece. That's why you alone can be trusted with this legacy." My phone buzzed. Speaking of siblings. A text from Sophia. "We're all at the plaza celebrating. Do try to join us if you can tear yourself away from your little key." Face blowing a kiss. I looked around the vault again at the treasures that had been hiding beneath their feet all along. Another buzz. "James, this time, don't feel too bad, Lizzie. Maybe that key opens a diary or something." Face with tears of joy. Just then Mrs. Chin appeared at the vault entrance. "Your sister called the house phone. They're planning to start renovations next week. Apparently, the study doesn't fit their modern vision for the mansion." I smiled, picking up the ledger. "Tell them there might be a slight delay with those plans." The next morning, I walked into Wright and Patterson's offices again. Mr. Patterson was expecting me. "I see you found it," he said, noting the ledger under my arm. "You knew." He smiled. "Your grandfather arranged everything meticulously. The second will is ready to be filed, along with all the necessary documentation for the collection. Shall I call the family?" An hour later, my siblings and parents stormed into the conference room. Sophia's perfect hair was slightly askew, James's tie crooked. They'd clearly rushed over at the mention of a second will. "What's the meaning of this?" my mother demanded. I sat at the head of the table, the ledger open before me. "It seems Grandpa's key opened more than just a door." Mr. Patterson began reading the second will. With each revelation, each astronomical figure, each priceless artifact listed, the color drained further from their faces. The subsurface vault and all contents therein, including but not limited to the archaeological collection, rare manuscripts and precious gems, valued at approximately $1.2 billion. Sophia dropped her designer handbag. The controlling interest in Spencer Holdings, including all subsidiary companies and overseas assets. James looked like he might faint. All to be held in trust by Elizabeth Spencer, to be managed according to her sole discretion. This is a joke, my mother whispered. It has to be. I opened my laptop, displaying photos of the vault's contents. The key you all laughed at? It opened Grandpa's real collection. Everything you inherited. I gestured at them. That was just the surface. You can't do this, James sputtered. We have contracts, plans. Actually, Mr. Patterson interjected, the 30-day freeze on asset liquidation makes all those contracts void. Additionally, as the new controlling trustee of Spencer Holdings, Ms. Elizabeth has final say over any use of family properties, including renovation plans. Sophia stood up so quickly her chair toppled. I've already announced the auction of my collection. I have buyers lined up. Your collection? I raised an eyebrow. You mean the decoys? Feel free to sell those. The real artifacts stay where they are. Why you? My mother's voice cracked. Why not James? He has the business experience. Because, I cut in, Grandpa knew I wouldn't see these treasures as just dollar signs. Each piece tells a story, carries history. That's what he spent years teaching me while you were all too busy to listen. I stood gathering my things. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting with the Museum of Natural History about a new wing we're funding. The Maxwell Spencer collection should be shared with the world, don't you think? As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. Oh, and Sophia? Don't worry about not having anything to do now that your auction's cancelled. The museum needs a junior curator for the children's educational program. I hear the starting salary is quite modest, but you'll learn so much. Walking out, I heard James's muffled cry of rage, followed by what sounded like an expensive briefcase being thrown. But I didn't look back. That evening, I returned to Grandpa's study, my study now. Mrs. Chen brought me tea in his favorite cup. Your grandfather would be proud, she said, straightening a photo on the desk, one of Grandpa and me, taken during one of our many afternoon talks. I picked up the brass key now hanging from a chain around my neck. He taught me well. Understanding isn't just about seeing what's there. It's about knowing where to look, she finished, smiling. Outside, I could hear cars pulling up, probably more lawyers hired by my siblings. Let them come. Some treasures, like the love of a grandfather who saw your true worth, were beyond any price they could offer. I opened the ledger again, running my fingers over Grandpa's neat handwriting. The key to understanding isn't always what it seems, I whispered, smiling at our secret. Sometimes it's exactly what it appears to be, if you're wise enough to see it.